I realized that there is some issue with sharing the screen and having a visual. So today I'm going to try a little bit different. I'll stop sharing when I've kind of discussed some of the main things that are on the slide. So let's see how this goes. Now, last time we had left off at this knowledge and ignorance slide. And there was a good reason for that, because this is a key topic and somewhat complicated. It touches upon some of the subtler aspects of what the Upanishads cover. I have been saying that the Upanishads, let me stop sharing here, that the Upanishads, they cover a pretty wide area, depending on how you look at it. So in terms of the knowledge part of it, the science of knowledge, as it's called, is epistemology, and there's been a lot of study on it and a lot of theories, and so the Upanishads too had their own points. Now, one of the things that differentiates the Upanishads from how the modern thinkers or the modern philosophers, how they categorize this, is there is a subject-object relationship. So there is the mind that is looking at a object, and then it knows about it. So there is a learning process involved. Maybe we read something, maybe we are looking at something, or somebody is telling us something, and that's how we know about things. Now, the Upanishad has got indirectly different ways in which it explains how this process of knowledge takes place. But that is one very key difference. And again, like I have been mentioning in some of the previous things that I talked about the Upanishad, this is a very vast, deep, lofty topic in and of itself. So we cannot go into it too deep, but the mind is generally looked upon as the instrument of where knowledge takes place, conception takes place. But in the Upanishadic view, the mind is also kind of matter, and that's why I said I don't want to go into this. It's a very big topic, and we will not delve into that. But we do want to understand the one small slice of the perspective of knowledge that the Upanishads talk about. And you will find references to this in Kathopanishad, in Mandukya Upanishad, in different ways. Mandukya Upanishad talks about Prajnana Ghana, how the knowledge and knower are related. In Kathopanishad, how the mind and the object that the mind is working on. And I use the word mind kind of loosely here, but let's understand where this is going. So you are trying to teach a child some mathematic concepts. You are trying to teach 2 + 2 is equal to 4, and you write it on a piece of paper and you show him, and the child, you are aware the child is not going to grasp it. So you are going to you give him one apple, and then you give him one other apple, and you say, you add 1 + 1 and you get 2, and then you put 2 apples and you say, this is 4, and the child doesn't get it, and you continue like this for a while, and then at certain moment there's a flash, there's a revelation, and the child now knows that 2 + 2 is equal to 4. He knows how this thing works. And there is a interesting analogy that they draw here, although it's not exactly relevant to the topic that we're discussing, but worth mentioning, that man, and we are not talking about extreme circumstances here, but man generally doesn't forget knowledge. So even when you are in some dire circumstance, you are in pain, but you are alert, whatever happens, if you are, God forbid, you get into an accident and you're lying there, and they do that. The doctor comes and asks you, what is 2 plus 2? And you don't forget it. You know it's 4. So what is happening here? So the Vedantic perspective, like I said, this is one slice, is there's a metamorphosis taking place. The mind is working on an object and it's trying to grapple around it. It's trying to know that object. And the moment when it knows it from a concept standpoint, it actually metamorphoses, it becomes that object. That is the point where knowledge takes place. There is a transformation in the mind. And don't stretch this concept too much. And we will get into some of these details because they are complicated. But in terms of knowledge, this notion of how knowledge takes place is one of the key things in understanding how we are going to look at some of the topics in the Bhagwad Gita. So if knowledge is something that you are aware of, that you know about, then ignorance is something that you are not aware of. And this notion of ignorance is it's taken at a very different level in the entire Upanishad. It's not some colloquial ignorance like, I don't know physics and I don't know chemistry. It's not taken in that sense. So let me go to the next slide here. So knowledge, the ignorance part of it is that you do not know the real truth. And one example that you will, most of the people who are the followers of Vedanta know this. There is a very, very popular example that's get quoted, cited time and again. And that is in Sanskrit, it's called Rajju Sarpa, which means a snake and a rope. So there is a snake, there is a rope lying in the dark in the alley, and you happen to look at it and you think it is a snake. So now there is a bunch of things happening here. One thing is, the first thing is that there is an ignorance. What is the ignorance? That you don't know that it is a rope. Now, this ignorance gives rise to an error. So what is the error over here? The error is that you thought of it as a snake. The same rope is seen by another person, and he too undergoes the same problem of ignorance. So he looks at the rope, he doesn't know it's a rope, and he thinks that it is a garland. So that is an error. So that is an ignorance piece and error piece. Again, it is discussed at great length in the Upanishads, and this is not what we are going to do here. So this ignorance that we are talking about, it is not the ignorance of not knowing physics or English. It's a different kind of ignorance. So the whole idea is to eliminate this ignorance, and there is a implied suggestion that by that you will kind of discover knowledge. So there is this idea about knowledge and ignorance that we are going to touch upon and see how it reflects in general in humans that we are, and how does it really matter to us? How why does it even affect me if I don't know the process of knowledge or what ignorance is? How does it matter? Because if I'm going to learn certain topics, then I have got books, I apply my mind and I come to know it. If I don't know the definition of knowledge, it doesn't matter, right? So how does it apply to us? So that's why keep these concepts at the back of our mind, and we will touch upon these topics at the relevant times, and we will delve into it. We don't have any restriction of time, but I do want to kind of narrow my discussions from a Bhagwad Gita perspective and not get too much into an Upanishadic and more scholarly perspective. So let me share my screen again. Now, with all this that we have talked about, we are now going to look at how where the Bhagavad Gita is placed in the Mahabharata. Before I do that, I don't have the slide right now, but for those of you who remember, I had shown in a chart where the Upanishads were placed. And after this analysis, this assimilation of Upanishadic teachings was done, then in order to shed light, because these are complex, lofty things, not everybody grasps this. Sometimes they kind of form weird rules around because of the complexity of this, that only certain type of people can know this, and this was misconstrued, abused, that nobody has the right to, or not nobody, but only certain people have the right to knowledge, although that was never the case. We are not going to get into that. So once the Upanishadic ideas were evolved, understood, the issues in them figured out, then to make it easy, they were weaved into different kind of stories, and that way they were made more palatable, more digestible to the more common person who wasn't day and night thinking about these things. And that is where the epics came in, the Ramayana and Mahabharat. I'll try and see if I can get back to that slide sometime later, but it was, I think, 2 or 3 sessions back that I had that slide on. So now we want to take a quick glance at Mahabharat. Now, Mahabharat, as I had mentioned in our first sessions, that it is about 100,000 verses epic, a very, very big epic, out of which 1,000 verses is what Bhagwad Gita is. And as I had told at that time, that it is going to take us some time to get to the point where we actually start studying it. And it is essential that we understand this context, because we won't be able to appreciate the brilliance of the Bhagavad Gita in addressing some of the complexities of the issues, the dexterous ease at which the concepts have been unfolded. We will not be able to appreciate that, which is why we are putting all this background together. So this slide, it shows the genealogy of the Mahabharata tree. Now, it is overwhelming, and we are virtually going to touch upon maybe 80% of these characters, and one by one we'll see this. We don't have to know all this right now, but what I want to show, or what I want to touch upon now, is if you look at the very top, it starts with the Kuru, the Kuru dynasty. It starts from the King Bharat. It's not written here, but King Bharat is where it starts from. And the from this Kuru, this genealogy, if you see, it comes down 4, 5, 6, 7 generations. And if you see at the bottom of this chart, there is Janmejay. So he is almost 4 or 5 generations down. And although this is really not required for us to know in our study of Bhagwad Gita, but this is an interesting piece of information. It's a matter of context, that this King Janmejay, and there is a story around him. He is performing a sacrifice. It's a snake sacrifice, and there is some story around it. But basically, that snake sacrifice, he is performing some, chanting some mantra. He has got a bunch of rishis who are doing it for him, and the power of these mantras are such that I have been saying time and again that these are all metaphors. Don't take anything at face value. Try to look behind these sentences. Don't you can question some of these things, but immediately you should think about these, whoever are these writers who are discussing some very valid, lofty, reasonable thoughts. When they make this kind of a comment, there's something behind that. We cannot take it as literal face value. So in this yajna, Janmejay is King Janmejay, Emperor Janmejay is performing this sacrifice where they are chanting some mantras, which is pulling snakes from all over the place, and they get burnt in this sacrifice. And in this sacrifice, there are times when there is less activity and stories and things are being told, and it is during one such days that there is Vaishampayan, who is, it's like a story within a story. There is one particular sage, Rishi, who is telling this story of Mahabharat. That's how it starts. If you take the book of Mahabharat and you open the first page, you will see that in this at the time of this yajna, this snake sacrifice, this Rishi is telling this story to someone, and then it goes on and on, that within this story there is another Rishi telling somebody else, and it takes a little bit of time before the actual story starts. So right from the top till the bottom, from the bottom is where this story starts. So if you see at the top, there is the King Kuru, the Emperor Kuru, and Mahabharata is huge. If somebody wants to really go verse by verse, it will take him a lifetime to go through this. So this is going to be another crash course. We are going to just look at we are going to see the story. Story is important, and we are going to see at the main characters that we are going to look into. So the king, the Kuru king, the first one, we will start with one of his main descendants. He is King Shantanu. So King Shantanu is let me start sharing again. So King Shantanu, he marries it's Ganges, the river Ganges, goddess Ganges. So this is kind of again, keep in mind, these are metaphors. We are going to see why it is the way it is. and don't just go overboard saying, this is all fantastic and all far stretched, and so there's no point reading into it. Keep an open mind. You'll see more meaning into it once we get into it. So this king Shantanu, he marries the river Ganges, and there is Mahabharata is full of stories within stories within stories. So this is one other story that she has got one condition of marriage, that he will not question what she does, and it so happens that she gives birth to 8 kids. 7 of them she lets go in the river Ganges, so they die, and that's what is being shown in this picture, that the king is lamenting the death of his 7 kids, and at the time of 8th one, the king cannot stand and he intervenes, and the 8th one survives, and we'll see who this 8th one is and what his role is. Now, on the other hand, there is one more leaf to this story, and you need to keep this chart in your mind. So we are talking about Shantanu and Ganga here. So what kids do you get from them? But before that, we have another story, and there is a Rishi Parashar, and he's one of those top level guys who can do anything. Keep an open mind. So he is basically, he says, I want a child, but being the Rishi that he is, he has got this supernatural power, so he doesn't have to get into any kind of physical interaction with a female to have a child. So he asks one female, and her name is Matsyagandha, and she put some conditions that, okay, but I need to still be a virgin even after a child is born, and that she happens to be a fisherwoman, and so there's some kind of a scent to it, fishy smell, and she says that this needs to go away. And so without again getting into too much of details, they come to some agreement, and then a son is born to her, and this son that is born to Parashar and now henceforth called Satyavati, he is Vyasa, Maharishi Veda Vyasa. And this Vyasa is really the author of this whole Mahabharat. But all convoluted. We are going to just take pieces that make sense, and we don't want to debate about things that don't make sense. That's just no point. Even if you are able to prove with enough amount of evidence that something in this story doesn't hold true or is incorrect, it's not relevant. It's like who has written Mahabharata? If we are able to prove that it was not Vyasa, somebody else wrote, who cares? If you are able to prove that the laws of gravitation were not discovered by Newton, but by somebody else, okay, there might have been some injustice, somebody else. It actually happened between Marconi and Tesla. Tesla was the one who discovered the sound waves, but Marconi got the credit for it. So it happened, but that is why if we look to stick to the facts that are relevant keep the bigger picture in mind. We are going towards the Bhagwad Gita here. So Parashar and Satyavati, they give birth to this boy, Vyasa, who is kind of, he is again all powerful. Now this thing that's going around where a female is giving birth to kids without having any kind of interaction with a male. You will see this happening again and again, and that's why it all stems from this guy Parashar. Parashar Rishi. He has his first son Vyasa. Now, this King Shantanu, who I mentioned earlier, who married Ganges, and the 7 kids who died, and the 8th one we'll talk about. He now marries this Satyavati. She's already got a kid from this Rishi Parashar, but now she marries Shantanu. So when she marries Shantanu, then Satyavati has 2 kids, Chitrangad and Vichitravirya. These names are also somewhat important. Somewhat, I said, they are not as important as what comes later. And so I will not get into this, although it's for somebody who is interested. These names, I mentioned earlier that in Sanskrit, the names are concatenation of things, like, Vedanta, as I mentioned, was Veda plus Anta. Similarly here, Vichitravirya, Chitranga, these are concatenations of different names. So here we see that Shantanu and Ganga, same, it's the river Ganges is called Ganga, and the manifestation of the river Ganges as a goddess, if you want to look at it that way. They give birth to a child whose name is not here. His name was Devavrata. Bhishma Devavrata was later called Bhishma, and I will tell you why it was like that. So Satyavati, when she marries this Emperor Shantanu, she knows about this son that Shantanu has from Ganga, from the river Ganges, whose name is Devavrata. And the Devavrata is a very remarkable person. He is damn good at virtually everything. He's an excellent administrator. He's a great warrior. He's a very brave person, and he's selfless, and he keeps all his subjects in the kingdom happy, and everybody is at the thought that he is going to be our next emperor. Everybody is happy with that, and everything is hunky-dory with him, and nobody has any doubts that he is going to be our next emperor. And obviously Satyavati knows that too. So she tells Shantanu that if you love me, which he does, then I have the condition that one of my kids should be emperor and not Devavrata. And this is kind of a blow to the king. And there's a big story that goes around it. And then this Bhishma comes to know, Devavrata comes to know about it. And so Devavrata now, for the sake of his father, he takes Devavrata kind of sacrifices a lot of things for his father in order to make his father happy. He says that, Dad, you don't worry. I will make sure that Satyavati gets what she wants. And how does he make sure of that? He basically takes an oath, and it's called as a great oath, if you will, and that's why it's called Bhishma Pratigna. That's where he gets his name from. So basically, he takes an oath saying that he would not get married, he would not have children. So there's no question of he himself ever having taking the throne, or his progeny taking the throne. And he also says that I will not rule, and that whoever occupies this throne of Hastinapur, which is where all this stay is taking place, I will see my dad, King Shantanu, in him. So I will always protect him. And then he does all this to give enough assurance to Satyavati that, okay, you will get what you need. make my dad happy. And so this oath that he takes, two things in this, that he will not have kids. Second thing is he will look at whoever occupies the throne as the king himself. These two things, they form one of the core reasons of why even the Mahabharat took place. That Bhishma took this oath. Now, one other thing that I didn't mention earlier was the remarkable person that he was. There's one other thing that he had, which is he had got this boon, or he has got this arrangement with some higher up god, that he could choose the hour of his death. Nobody can kill him. He can, well, somebody can kill him, but he can decide that, I'll die on so and so date on so and so year. So that's kind of one of his perks of being the kind of person he is. His guru is Guru Parashurama. Don't have to get into the details of all that. But Bhishma as a character, the 2 points that we have to remember, I will reiterate. He chopped down the tree, his progeny tree, at his level, and he also took this decision that whoever occupies the throne was as good as the emperor. So this decision had very, very far-reaching consequences. Now, the two brothers that he had, half brothers, is it? Yeah, they are half brothers. They were obviously not this remarkable. And so what happened was Bhishma, he happened to go to a kingdom, Kashi it was called, and he got three princesses with him, the three princesses of Kashi, and they he asked them to marry his half brothers. So what is important in this piece is the three princesses were called Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. Out of this, the name Amba is important. So Ambika, she Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. And when Bhishma was getting them back to Hastinapur, his home kingdom, Amba then revealed that her heart had been given out to somebody, and therefore it was not fair. And then Bhishma agreed with that. He said, the great person that he was, he says, I understand. And I don't know, maybe he said, I apologize for my mistake. And then he sent her back. And then when she goes back, she's not well received and all that. And she leads a very difficult life, and then she dies. And so we are going to talk about Amba in a great deal later on. So that's why this character is important, and to remember what happened. So she was brought and she was sent back, and she was very unhappy, and then she led a difficult life, and then she died. But she had this vengeance in her heart towards Bhishma. Now, the other kids, the other two kids that were there, so Bhishma got these two princesses to marry the two half brothers, but there was a problem. The problem was that they didn't have kids for whatever reason. I mean, again, the story is convoluted. And if you remember, I asked you to keep in mind that how did Parashar, the sage Parashar, how did he have his son Vyasa through this, supernatural means, without interacting physically with this woman, he had this son. And so when these two princesses who married Chitrangada and Vichitravirya, they couldn't get any child. Satyavati, the mother, she asked Vyasa that, can you do me a favor and impregnate these two princesses using his supernatural powers? There's no physical contact. And he agrees to that. Now, and so it takes place. And so there is one thing that's interesting that happens, is there happens to be a maid. There's a long story around how this all happened, but basically it's a maid. And then these two princesses, one was Ambika, the other was Ambalika. So the progeny is such that Ambika gave birth to a king called Dhritarashtra, and who happens to be blind. And Ambalika gave birth to a son whose name was Pandu. And what is not shown in this chart is the maid that was there. She too bore a child. We are not going to get into that story, but something happened, and Vyas actually was able to impregnate not just these two, but this maid as well. And the child that the maid had was another very important character, and that was Vidur. So now we have got Shantanu having the two, this Bhishma, and then these two sons, and then they have got two sons, and Vidur is the maid son, which is Dhritarashtra and Pandu. So Vidur plays a very key role later on in the entire Mahabharat. Some aspects of it will touch, because he doesn't come that much in the Mahabharata as much as these other characters come in. So now Pandu happens to marry Kunti, and Kunti is again the thing that we said, Parashar without having physical contact giving birth to Vyasa, Vyasa without having physical contact giving birth to Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Now Pandu and Kunti, they are married, but Kunti happens to have a boon, and in the boon she was granted this kind of unique thing, that any of the gods, the sun god, rain god, god of gods, which is Indra in the heavens, or any other god that she wanted, she could have a child from them. And what she does is, in her curiosity, she does a stupid mistake. Before her marriage, she wants to test this boon. So she asks, she tests it out with the sun god, and she says, yeah, I want a child from you. And then it happens, and now she's in a predicament, she's in a fix. So what can she do? So she takes this child and she puts him in a basket and let it go in a river with a very heavy heart. And then this child, and this is also a very important incident. So this child was later on adopted by a charioteer, and the charioteer's wife's name is Radha. And in Sanskrit, when if you want to refer somebody by your mother's name, he was called Radheya. And later on, this child's name was Karna, and it's kind of a, if you look at it from a very story perspective, this character Karna is having a very unfortunate and very difficult life, and all around things happen to him that don't seem fair. It is very unjust right from his birth. So although he is the eldest of the the children of the king Pandu, they are called Pandavas. So he actually happens to be the eldest of the Pandavas, but he is never given that right. And the way things turn out, he happens to be in a different tent, or he happens to be in a different company of people than where he's supposed to be. So this incident is also an important incident. And I will, whenever we have the need to touch upon or bring these characters into discussion, I will try and see if I can go back to these stories, because there are just too many characters, and it's possible we may not be able to track who is who and how they came about to be what they are. So I'll touch upon it. Now, Pandu and Kunti, they have the same kind of, technology. They use the same kind of technology, and then because of the boon that she has, Pandu happens to have an early death. Now, Kunti makes use of her boon, and she has a son that she has from the in the Hindu mythology. In heaven, there are all these gods: sun, moon, and rain, and the god of prosperity, and then wind and whatnot. So there is a king of all these gods, and his name is Indra. So she gets a child from Indra, and his name is Arjun. Now this Arjun, this kid from Indra that Kunti has, he is the main character, main actor. So the Bhagwad Gita, in fact, is being told to this Arjun. The whole Bhagwad Gita revolves around this Arjun. But Kunti's eldest son is Yudhishthir. And Yudhishthir is the son that she gets from the Lord of Death. His name is Yama. So she, with this boon and all, she happens to contact Yama, and she has the son from him, and that is Yudhishthir. And then she begets a son from the wind god, and his name is Bhima. And then Pandu has two other sons from another wife, and they are Nakul and Sahadev. So I want to see if I can continue. Maybe I'll just touch upon what's happening with Dhritarashtra, and then we can stop for today. So Pandu's 5 sons. Now Dhritarashtra, he happens to marry a princess from the kingdom of Gandhar, and they give birth to 100 sons. There are 100 Kauravas, and the eldest son is Duryodhana, and his the next sibling of his is Dushasana. Now, one thing you can notice, or you want to know, is these children that Dhritarashtra had, all their names, they start with Du. Now, in Sanskrit, generally, if you're talking about good things, they start with Su, like Su. Something that's Suas, like it's good smell, or anything that you want to make sound in the good things. If you've got a bad things and good things, there's anything you want to make is good. So if Vada means, a dialogue, if you will. If you want to make it to the good dialogue, you add the word so to it. So samvad. Now, if you want to make something negative, you add do to it. So this Dhritarashtra, his eldest son is Duryodhana. The next son is Dushasana, and they've got 100 sons. But they also have one sister. Her name is again, no surprise is there, Dushala. And Dushala has a husband. His name is Jayadrat. And the reason these characters are important is there's a very interesting incident that takes place in Mahabharat. I will have to see if I can. I need to discuss that. It probably doesn't reflect at all in the Bhagwad Gita. Maybe I'll touch upon. I'm not sure. So now with this, we are slowly building this tree. If I got to go back to that chart that we had, so we are at I don't know, 4th or 5th generation here. So we have got the Pandava level. We have got the Pandavas. So Kunti has given birth to the 5 Pandavas, actually, if you consider the illegitimate child, if you will, 6 Pandavas. There is Karna, then there is Yudhishthir, and Bhima, Arjun, Nakul, and Sahadeva. So these 5, they happen to marry a princess, and that part of the story we will see next time. So we haven't even, we are just introducing ourselves to the characters. There is one more level of generation that we will go, and that's where the actual Mahabharat starts between these characters. And you might be wondering why we need to know all this, but it is you will be very, very surprised at what kind of role these characters play, and why they are so important, and why they are so detailed in the Mahabharata. Interestingly, Mahabharata evolved over a period of time. It didn't start out with 100,000 verses. It started out with much less verses, and it got added as time went by. And there are different versions or editions of it. There is a institute in Pune, in Maharashtra, India, the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. And there are scholars, great scholars, Sanskrit scholars, who spent virtually a decade or maybe more studying through all these different scriptures, and they have their own authentic version of what they think actual Mahabharata is. And there are some very astonishing facts that they came across. It's more academic in nature. We don't want to get into it, but it is more of a side information, interesting historical and academic information. So next time when we meet, we'll go over this next generation, and probably some of the early stories of the Mahabharata. Thanks. Bye.